on 5 pillars which were adopted at the 54th conference. And the first one is building a better Africa and a world inclusive of peace building, post-conflict, reconstruction and development. And so the discussions went to the African Union, and the resolution was that the ANC and ANC-led government to mobilize counterparts in the continent to advance the African Renaissance together with the AU Agenda 2063 and the African Continental Free Trade area as a means of ensuring progress in the implementation of programs and a campaign. And I think Comrade Kubai must have dealt with the issue of the AFCFTA.
Yes.
And the ANC remains concerned, obviously, about Morocco's admission in the AU despite its continued colonization of Western Sahara. And with regard to SADC, in terms of building a better Africa and a better world, the ANC must continue to support Zimbabweans in their efforts to find holistic solutions to challenges they face and support the AU and SADC positions against sanctions that were imposed. Comrade Kubai also dealt with BRICS, and I might just indicate that this was also a long discussion about the importance of South Africa within BRICS, and especially in this changing world and the challenges that are faced, and what we can be able to do to maximize the opportunities that are brought to South Africa by being members of BRICS. And with the resolution was that the ANC-led government should support the expansion of BRICS by admitting additional members on the basis of formally agreed criteria, principles, and values. And I think you are aware of the fact that there are some countries that have been requesting to be part of BRICS, and the discussions are ongoing because the potential from a population development to a developmental agenda to finance and to all other issues that are related to supporting our economies, but also the market, expanding the markets within the BRICS for all countries. With regard to peace building, reconstruction and development, the ANC notes the support of South African government provided to the Ethiopian Tigray peace talks, which resulted in a globally acclaimed peace agreement. The ANC commends the efforts of the parties and mediators for this achievement. The ANC expects the SA government to continue to support this peace process. With regard to solidarity and campaigns, I already indicated earlier on that our international relations really is based on ensuring that there's peace, security, and stability, and there's also a continued solidarity campaign to those that are still struggling. For instance, the ANC continue to pledge and intensify its solidarity with the people of Palestine for freedom, independence, justice, and equality. I'm not going through all the resolutions from a point of view of expanding, because many of that is here, but also when you get the final report that came out of the conference itself, you can make reference to all that. And again, with the Western Sahara, for instance, Western Sahara faces huge challenges which we are very much all aware of, and the ANC reaffirms the decisions of the 54th conference that a special envoy must be appointed. As a movement, the ANC has to consider elevating issues of Western Sahara through humanitarian assistance, bursaries, and other material support. And this, for us, is informed by the fact that even ourselves, during our own liberation struggle, we had camps in different places, and we even had people who supported our schools in different places, like in Tanzania, where we were preparing ourselves for a possible free South Africa, which we have today. With regard to Cuba, I'm still on solidarity. The ANC calls on ANC structures and alliance and South Africans to intensify the humanitarian campaign in support of Cuba through donations of non-perishable foods, medicines, and clothing. And I must indicate here that the comrades who were participating from the provinces, that is the delegates, they raised strong concern about the manner in which, when government is trying to strengthen its relationship with Cuba, due to the historical reasons, it's always castigated, and some people think we are wasting money when we are supporting Cuba, and we are even wasting time when we are calling for the removal of the sanctions by the Americans. But the fact is, there's a historical perspective to all this. Again, with regard to solidarity efforts, we had a discussion around Eswatini and concerned about the challenges that are happening in Eswatini, and the ANC confirmed its strong support for the people of Eswatini and calls for direct engagement with the Eswatini monarch and government leaders to find lasting solutions to the challenges facing the people of Eswatini. The comrades' discussions here, the delegates' discussions, was the fact that most of the time the ANC is very much close to the opposition parties and engages with the opposition parties in Eswatini. But the feeling was that while we do that, and we confirm that we'll continue with that, there is a need for the African National Congress to even go back to its own historical background of Eswatini having been one of those countries that supported us, and therefore a direct engagement would be very important. With regard to transformation of global governance, you'll recall I already referred to this right from the beginning. It's the United Nations, and we're noting the changing geopolitical landscape. The ANC and ANC-led government advocates for the realization of urgent UN reforms that have been spoken about by the African continent overall for many, many years. The ANC-led government should move towards text-based negotiations on the UN reforms. With regard to the International Criminal Court, which is the ICC, the ANC noted its previous positions on the continental approach, signaling countries of the continent's withdrawal and robust engagement have positively impacted and contributed to the ICC being substantively reformed for the better. And therefore, the ANC and the ANC-led government must rescind the withdrawal from the ICC court and intensify its lobby for ratification of the Malabo Protocol. And again here, the discussions were around ensuring that Africa itself has structures that can hold its leaders accountable and not always be relying on international, but it must also have its own. And I think the discussions about the Malabo Protocol have been going on for a very long time. With regard to policy development, in terms of sustainable world peace, the ANC calls for the peaceful resolution of conflicts and calls on major powers to stop engaging in proxy wars. And here, the discussion was about particularly the current war situation that we see of Ukraine and Russia, and the whole discussion around the NATO and the discussions around the concerns that Russia has had for many years, but also the concern was the growing number of weapons and the deployment of all these weapons, and what would happen actually when at some time the process of peace is given an opportunity and chance, and therefore the proliferation in the entire region of weapons. And therefore, the 55th also conference of the ANC recalled the historical bonds of solidarity and friendship between the ANC and the Chinese Communist Party, and in the context of strategic partnership between South Africa and the People's Republic of China, PRC, reaffirmed the One China policy and urged the South African government to continue articulating this position in all relevant international platforms. And of course, the ANC further affirmed its support to China's efforts in safeguarding its national sovereignty and territorial integrity. One of the issues that we had to deal with as the commission, which the ANC subcommittee on international relations cannot stay very far from, is the issue of addressing what is called the xenophobia, because we believe that as the African National Congress, we need to find ways and means of firstly strengthening our relations with the entire African continent, but also we must be able to develop long-term strategy for dealing with the so-called xenophobia and its root causes. And I think, I'm sure that the economic transformation must have also dealt with that, or even Comrade Ntwaledi from the social transformation, I'm sure they must have dealt with it. But from an international perspective, it has a negative impact on our international relations, because we are viewed as a nation that is sometimes, people think we are intolerant of other people, and in particular people that come from the African continent. And therefore, dealing with the root cause is about ensuring that at the AU, is about ensuring that at regional level, it's about ensuring that at all structures of both political, social, and economic development of the continent, we must engage directly with the leaders of those countries where many of these people come from, to say, can they make sure also that they create a conducive environment for their citizens who are forced sometimes to come to South Africa because they're thinking there's greener pastures, only to find that South Africa has got its own economic and social economic challenges. But also the Commission agreed that we must create public awareness on the dangers of xenophobia and the fact it is against the character of the ANC being a non-racial and non-sexist movement that is committed also to the development of the African continent. But also there was a resolution to say that we develop adequate intelligence measures and effective challenges for public to report incidences of xenophobia as early warning mechanism to avoid worsening of incidences and flare-ups. I think one of the things that I think in this document that we missed is with regard to the building of a better Africa, and a better Africa in particular. There was a resolution on the African Credit Rating Agency, and noting the discussions on the African Union to establish an African Credit Rating Agency as part of efforts to ensure access to capital and to change the global financial architecture. The ANC-led government must support efforts aimed at establishment of an African Credit Rating Agency. I think that one is very important. But also with regard to organizations such as the Pan-African Women's Organization, there was a resolution that the ANC must focus on supporting the Pan-African Women's Organization, but also must support young women's structures within power, so that this organization must be the one that mobilizes for young women of the continent, not just of South Africa, as well as ensure that the Pan-African youth movement is supported, and that the ANC-led government must ensure the full implementation of the African Youth Charter to ensure effective youth participation in the development process, particularly given the demographics of the African continent, and realizing that there is the youth bulge, and therefore it's important for our countries overall in the continent to focus on what needs to be done for young people. I'm just quickly looking. Oh, there is also another very important element that relates to international relations, is that gender and international relations. The ANC should incorporate the recommendations that have been made by the Gender Reference Subcommittee, in particular the establishment of a task team on women in foreign policy anchored in the NEC to assess and monitor gender equality and women empowerment. And the ANC should find a funding mechanism to better utilize our politically deployed ambassadors or former ambassadors and their experience by forming party think tanks named Jesse Duarte International Relations Peace Academy. You know that Comrade Jesse Duarte, besides being just a Deputy Secretary General, she was very strong in international relations, and she supported international relations. I think that I've covered most. Thank you very much. I can take questions.
No, let's take questions.
If there are any.
Hey, Sis Lindy, we pushed 5 hours.
Huh? Yeah, no, I'm
we
saying.
We pushed 5 hours with them. Okay, let's take questions. What's your name? Chavi, so Eyewitness News, Gavin, Newsroom, Africa. It's better said by me, you know. So you don't do mistakes.
Tabiso
Tabiso is from EWM. Gert from Vierentwintig. Netwerk Vierentwintig. And then Ndebo from SABC.
Okay, we can go.
Okay, you can start telling.
I just want to get clarity, Minister. The ANC.
No, today I'm Lindiwe Zulu. I'm the National Executive Committee member.
I just want to get the ANC is very clear, as you said, it's very clear on who it supports, right? Israel, Palestine, the ANC supports Palestine. Taiwan, China, the ANC supports one China. You know, Swatini, ICC. We're very clear on who you guys are supporting. But when it comes to Ukraine, Russia, we've been hearing, you know, from Mr. Makura, we heard from Mr. Mashlobo, we're also hearing from you. It's still not clear where the ANC stands in terms of, you know, do you support Ukraine, do you support Russia? I understand that you have raised, obviously, issues about, you know, the dangers of a nuclear war and, you know, the weapons, but is there a position that the ANC is taking? Because this is a conflict essentially between two countries. So is there a position that the ANC is taking in terms of which country is supporting? Or it's just, you know, neutral in the face of war?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's Government of Eastern Africa. I understand the ANC conference has resolved that the expansion.
That's not the ANC, it's Gavin.
Gavin,
Yeah. Okay, Gavin?
I understand that the conference has resolved to support the expansion of the BRICS grouping based on, if I heard you correctly, specific criteria, values and principles. Has the ANC deliberated on which criteria, values and principles the BRICS countries should take into consideration when considering expansion? More directly, does the ANC believe Saudi Arabia should join the BRICS group? Any comment on Saudi Arabia's human rights report and how that has been criticized in its attempts to join the BRICS group? Thank you.
I didn't hear you properly. Did you say we should rescind our withdrawal from the International Court of Justice because of the progress made in reform? And how does that impact on our adherence to the principles of the Rome Protocol?
Thank you.
Okay, my question is linked to El's question on the Malawi declaration that we should cut ties with the ICC, and instead we should focus on building or capacitating institutions in South Africa.
I think we did not say we are cutting ties.
Receive.
No, we rescind the decision that we had taken before that we're cutting ties.
So you find working?
Yes, we fine with working. Sorry, I should not be doing that because I have to, but I just didn't want you to go on with that understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, no, then that question falls away. But nonetheless, you're talking about capacitating. We should again capacitate the institutions in the continent that will hold African leaders or African countries accountable. Some countries, for instance, I mean Zimbabwe at some point, there was the SADC protocol that had its own judgment on what's happening in Zimbabwe. But nonetheless, Zimbabwe went ahead and ignored anything that came from the SADC tribunal. And secondly, how is the African Union alive to issues of human abuse if you can have the African Union accepting Morocco while it is colonized the country in the form of Sahara? And again, there was a self-imposed sort of a commitment or resolution by the AU to silence the country in 2020. That hasn't happened. Instead, you've seen the moving of the goalpost.
So I missed that one of the self-imposed.
That at some point the African Union committed to silence the gun by 2020.
Oh yes, okay.
But that didn't happen. Instead, they had to move the goalpost. How committed is the African continent really, or the AU leaders committed to finding peace in the continent? Because some of them sit in that annual pilgrimage called the AU summit in January. But seated there are some people who are very cruel to their own populations. How is the ANC trying to convince the AU and African leaders in particular? And maybe finally, when it comes to party-to-party relations, I know that the ANC has worked with a number of fraternal parties, especially in the continent and in the region. MPLA, Frelimo, and Swap, Sicily. The ANC goes to its elective conference. The anything that we learn from these parties, we know that they go to conferences, and we are aware that their conferences are not as seamless as we want them to be, but they are not as robust as yours. Where at some point the Secretary General there, where the mandate said, elections in the ANC has become a matter of life and death. What are you learning? Because they go to conferences, but we've never seen what's happening when the ANC goes to conference, where you have fightings and everything.
Okay, I think that was the last one. Okay, let me start with Thabiso. Thabiso, you are right when you say this conflict is two countries. And the African National Congress is calling on a peaceful resolution. We cannot say we don't have a position. We have a position. And the position is we need to be able to support processes from both sides, because if you think about it, I think you'll recall that when the whole conflict started, we were accused as the ANC of having met only with Russia, and we didn't meet with the ambassador of Ukraine. It's not true. I personally met both sides. And the reason why we're meeting for both sides is because, one, as we say, the African National Congress, we have to do everything we can to make sure that there's peaceful resolutions of any conflict that exists. So our support is going to be both processes within the region, both processes that have to be done both by Russia and Ukraine to move towards coming to the table and having a discussion. And I think President Cyril Ramaphosa in particular, as a president of the country, has been very firm about the fact that we are willing as a country to come to table and support an end to the war. We don't think it is right for any part of the world to be in any war situation, because it's the ordinary people that normally suffer from any war situation. And so we're supporting principles of, can the two sides come to the table and discuss what would be the lasting solution. But at the same time, we are aware of the global interest in there. And we're saying from NATO to any other who've got an interest in the conflict, in resolving the conflict, because we think that it's better for even the European Union to engage much more in finding a solution to the conflict. We are not one-sided about how can the conflict be ended. We are very clear that we will engage on both sides. Well, remember that even the speaker, Unosiviwe Mapisa Ngqakula, had to travel to Ukraine itself on the basis of looking for solutions and what Parliament could also do within the different structures, the global structures that Parliament has, to go and engage. We are not one-sided on this one, I can assure you. We want to contribute towards ending the conflict, because not only is it impacting on the lives of ordinary people. It's also impacting on us as a country from issues of petrol rising, food prices rising. So we will continue to look for solutions, and we continue to engage on both sides. With regard to Gavin, the expansion of BRICS, yes, I think we have been very clear about what the principles of the African National Congress are. And yes, the scrutiny as to whether issues of human rights and a whole range of other issues, the directive to government is to say we must not lose sight of the principles that we stand for as the African National Congress. And therefore, when government is engaging at the level of the BRICS, they must engage in terms of ensuring that the principles that we've clearly articulated here we stand for. By the way, the other platform where I think it will be a very good platform for us to have a conversation about the expansion is the political parties of BRICS. And next is this year we are chairing BRICS, and we are responsible for a meeting of the different political parties of the members of BRICS. And that is almost like a prelude towards BRICS itself, because the political parties are usually hosted before the summit of BRICS takes place. So I don't necessarily want to get into further discussions about whether Saudi Arabia will be accepted or not, because we as the ANC affirm our principles of who must be part and parcel of BRICS. But when we have the political parties' engagement, I'm 100% sure that the issue of those countries in terms of their approach to human rights, in terms of their approach to the needs of their people, in terms of their approach to ensuring that growth in their own countries is for their community. So that will be discussed. Maybe we can follow it up when the time comes for us to discuss at a political level. Because as different political parties, obviously we have to influence each other. This is the dynamics of the globe, but the African National Congress must always stand firm on its principles. I think the issue of the ICC, I have clarified that we are rescinding a decision. We are not saying we are pulling out of the ICC. And also, it's the experience that has been since the time that the decision was taken, the developments that we have seen, for instance, in Sudan, in Southern Sudan. As the African National Congress, we must be live to dynamics. We must be live to strengthening of institutions. And when we take decisions and we see that those decisions in some instances are not necessarily pushing the proper agenda, we must be able to have those conversations. And it leads me your question with regard to the strengthening of institutions in the African continent. This is one of the biggest weaknesses in the African continent. And the biggest weakness in the African continent is about strengthening the institutions of governance. Because it's one thing to win elections and then not be accountable even to the people that elected you. So when we talk about the Malabo, for instance, it's about going back and saying, you are saying there are some countries who, when we can make those decisions, and some countries can decide they're not going to implement that. The African continent and the leaders of the continent, we need to be able to be appreciative of the fact that institutional recourse is very important for the people of the African continent. When people go and elect different leaders and different political parties, they've got high expectations. One, on ensuring that human rights are respected. Two, on ensuring that the economies of these countries respond to the needs of the people. Three, the institutions themselves must be strengthened so that it's not institutions that can be changed willy-nilly by anybody who comes into government. And you rightfully raise the issue of what do we learn from the former liberation movements. We use liberation movements, it's between being former liberation movement and liberation movement. What we, as the African National Congress, are trying to do is to say, can we, as the African National Congress, in engagement with the liberation movements, go back and ask ourselves the question, are we still serving the purpose that was meant for us to free our countries? Number one. Are we still serving the people that we fought for? Are we strengthening our institutions of governance so that people can continue to have confidence and build and be sure that when we go out and campaign and we come back after elections, we implement party-to-party relations, reason and purpose? It's not for just, we were fighting or we were supporting each other during the liberation struggle. Are we still standing to the purpose and reason why we fought to free our people? And can we use this word, can we learn from each other good practices? These are the words that we're using. Can we learn good practices between ourselves as liberation movement? Can we also be able to influence some of the countries in terms of silencing the guns? The biggest problem we face in silencing the guns is also the fact that some people have to sell the guns, and they continue to deepen the crisis so that at the end of the day they can continue selling their weapons. And the African continent must wake up to that reality, because most of these weapons that we are using in the African continent against each other, they are not produced in the African continent. They are produced somewhere, and we have to go and use the little resources that we have to go and procure very, very expensive guns, which at the end of the day are pointing to our own people. I think I'm done with the questions.
Okay. No, thanks very much, Kuti. Yo. No, this is detention. No.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. No, but you can ask it on the side, or you want to.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because we need to go to other programs too. Thank you. You've been sitting.